Imagine buying a refrigerator and somehow having to haul it up 3 flights of stairs in a building with no elevator. Even with straps, a dolly, solid steps, and a delivery truck parked right outside, a few people would still struggle. Now replace that refrigerator with blocks of stone weighing an average of 2.5 tons. They had to be transported over long distances, lifted high into the air, and fitted together into a structure weighing roughly 6 million tons. The ancient Egyptians had no engines and no modern cranes. So how did they do it? Human muscle? Giant ramps? Or some surprisingly simple technique we have misunderstood for centuries? And how did thousands of workers coordinate their efforts year after year? That is what makes the Great Pyramid so extraordinary. It is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world, and for more than 3,800 years, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth. Movies often show the pyramids being built by enslaved people working under the whip. But archaeology tells a very different story. Researchers discovered the graves of pyramid builders near the royal burial complex itself. The evidence suggests that these were respected laborers, not enslaved workers, and that many took genuine pride in what they were building. They were organized into crews with bold names such as the Chosen Ones. In other words, the pyramid site may have looked less like a massive prison camp and more like an enormous national construction project. But thousands of workers create another enormous problem. What do you feed them? Inside the workers' settlement, archaeologists found huge quantities of cattle, sheep, and goat bones. Estimates suggest that each worker may have received around 200 to 300 grams of meat per day. Think about that for a second. One of the first secrets behind the pyramids was not hidden inside a tomb. It was being served for dinner. And meat was only part of the menu. Massive bakeries used rows of ceramic molds to produce enough bread for the entire workforce. A single large loaf might be divided among 6 or 7 people. Nutrient-rich beer was also included in their daily rations and may even have served as part of their payment. Building a mountain out of stone did not just require brilliant engineers. It required an extremely reliable kitchen. Now we reach one of the hardest questions. How do you drag a 2.5-ton block across loose sand? The answer may have been surprisingly simple. Workers could pour water onto the sand in front of a wooden sled. Damp sand creates less resistance, allowing the sled to move more easily and reducing the number of people needed to pull it. It almost sounds too easy. But sometimes physics can solve a 2.5-ton problem with little more than a bucket of water. Of course, many of the stones came from far beyond Giza. The Egyptians solved that problem by turning the Nile into a transportation highway. They dug canals and built harbors close to the construction site, allowing stone to travel hundreds of kilometers by boat instead of being dragged the entire way across the desert. But here is where it gets interesting. Those boats were remarkable pieces of engineering themselves. The vessels were made from wooden planks pierced with holes and literally stitched together with rope, using few, if any, nails. Once the boats entered the water, the wood expanded, tightening the joints and helping seal the hull. Some vessels could even be taken apart, carried across land, and assembled again elsewhere. They were a little like giant construction kits, except these kits were designed to carry stones weighing several tons. And this story has an eyewitness. A supervisor named Merer recorded his limestone deliveries from Tura to Giza on papyrus. His notes included travel dates, routes, and cargo details. It was essentially an ancient spreadsheet. These records reveal that the pyramid was not built through magic or mystery, but through schedules, transportation networks, careful accounting, and an extraordinary amount of organization. Before any stone could be loaded onto a boat, it first had to be cut from the quarry using copper chisels and heavy stone hammers. The work was so demanding that countless worn and broken chisel fragments were left behind in the quarries. Individual blocks were also marked according to the crew responsible for them. It was basically a work order carved directly onto the stone one that could not be misplaced, blown away, or accidentally thrown in the trash. Finally, fine white limestone from Tura was polished smooth and used to create the pyramid's outer casing. When the Great Pyramid was first completed, it did not have the rough brown-gray appearance we see today. Its surface would have gleamed beneath the Egyptian sun and been visible from far across the landscape. Most of that outer casing was later removed, But an even greater mystery remains. Once all those stones reached Giza, how did the builders lift them so high? The biggest question still remains. How did they lift the stones so high? The most common theory involves enormous ramps made of earth and sand. But to reach the top, a straight ramp may have needed to stretch for more than a kilometer. Others have proposed something even more ambitious, a kind of hydraulic elevator powered by water. The problem is that no single theory explains every clue left behind. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin offered a different possibility: a spiral ramp hidden inside the pyramid itself. According to his 3D model, workers may have pulled the stones through an internal passage concealed behind the outer walls. At each corner, they could have used an open chamber to rotate the block 90 degrees before continuing upward. But an elegant model is not the same as evidence. In 1986, a worker reportedly saw a desert fox crawl into a hole near the top of the pyramid and disappear behind the stonework. That suggested there might be empty space inside. L-shaped chambers discovered near several corners made the theory even more intriguing. Sometimes history leaves a fox to point science in the right direction. Even though we still do not know exactly how the stones were lifted, the pyramid's alignment is astonishingly precise. It is off true north by only about 1/10 of a degree. With no GPS and no modern compass, the builders relied on sunlight, shadows, and the stars. They may have used an instrument called a merkit to sight stars that never disappeared below the horizon. Getting the direction right was only the beginning. The foundation also had to be almost perfectly level. Across an area roughly the size of 7 football fields, the difference in height is less than 2.5 centimeters. Engineers carved and flattened thousands of square meters of solid rock. They may even have filled narrow channels with water to check whether the surface was level. Inside the pyramid, the story becomes more than an engineering problem. Narrow shafts point toward important regions of the sky, as though the structure were designed to guide the pharaoh's spirit toward the stars. The Egyptians believed the king would join the sun god Ra, help defeat the forces of darkness, and continue protecting Egypt from the afterlife. But the king's chamber faced a very physical danger: the crushing weight of the pyramid above it. Builders somehow raised granite beams weighing around 60 tons to a height of several dozen meters. Then, to keep the chamber from collapsing, they created 5 empty spaces above it to redirect and distribute the pressure. These were not decorative rooms. They were part of a daring structural solution unlike anything built before. Thousands of years later, modern technology began looking through the stone. Scientists used cosmic particles called muons to scan the pyramid of Khufu. Their detectors revealed an enormous hidden void, often compared in size to the body of a Boeing 747. But what is it? A secret chamber? A construction passage? Something else entirely. The pyramid is still refusing to give up all its answers. While the mysteries inside remain unresolved, the workers' city has become much clearer. It was not a chaotic slum. It was carefully organized with separate areas for skilled craftsmen and general laborers. Some skeletons show broken bones that had been successfully treated and healed, suggesting that injured workers received medical care, and that is only part of the story. In the middle of the desert, the Egyptians designed structures that captured cool western winds, helping reduce heat and preserve food almost like ancient desert refrigerators. Potters, weavers, cooks, storehouse managers, and countless other specialists all played a role. The pyramids were not built by a few mysterious geniuses. They were built by an entire society operating like a remarkably coordinated machine. The Egyptians did not simply wake up one morning knowing how to build a perfect pyramid. First, they had to fail. Khufu's father, King Sneferu, commissioned a pyramid with sides so steep that the structure began showing signs of instability. Halfway through construction, the engineers were forced to reduce the angle, creating the strange bent shape we see today. It looks like a gigantic design mistake, and that is essentially what it was. But that failure taught Egyptian builders how to distribute weight, control the slope, and eventually construct the far more stable Great Pyramid at Giza. Not every pyramid was competing to be the largest. The pyramid built for King Menkaure was much smaller, but part of its exterior was covered in luxurious red granite. This incredibly hard stone had to be transported by boat from distant Aswan, then shaped, polished, and fitted with extraordinary precision. Some clues have even led researchers to wonder whether a second, still undiscovered entrance may be hidden somewhere within that stonework. But here is where the story gets strange. Egyptian ships did not always stay on the water. When expeditions needed to reach the Red Sea in search of copper, workers dismantled their vessels plank by plank, loaded the pieces onto donkeys, and carried them across roughly 150 miles of desert. Once they reached the coast, shipbuilders stitched the boats back together with rope and sailed out to sea. A ship walking across the desert sounds like a joke, except it actually happened. Of course, this enormous system did not operate on salaries in the modern sense. Workers were paid in bread, beer, and other essential supplies. But do not picture thousands of people stumbling around the construction site drunk. Egyptian beer was thick, nutritious, and closer to liquid food than a modern drink. Every loaf and every ration of beer had to be carefully measured, distributed, and recorded. Building a pyramid also meant building a massive exchange economy to support it, and that was only part of its impact. The project pulled workers, food, tools, and raw materials from across Egypt into one vast network. As thousands of people labored toward the same goal, they may have begun to see themselves as members of a single unified kingdom. Egypt built the pyramid, but in a sense, the pyramid also helped build Egypt along with the transportation routes, administrative systems, and national organization that spread across the country. The workers were divided into smaller crews with proud names such as the Chosen Ones. These teams may have competed to see who could work faster and more accurately. Deep inside the pyramid, archaeologists have discovered graffiti left behind by the builders themselves. Apparently, people 4,500 years ago also enjoyed naming their teams, competing with co-workers, and leaving their signatures in places they assumed no one would ever see. But tens of thousands of people could not coordinate themselves through enthusiasm alone. Behind the project stood Ankhaf, a member of the royal family who is believed to have played a major role in managing the construction site. He would have helped coordinate workers, ships, food supplies, and millions of stone blocks. His surviving portrait shows a stern-looking man, and he had every reason to look serious. One broken schedule could bring the entire operation to a halt. At the quarries of Tura, workers cut deep into the hills to extract the finest white limestone for the pyramid's outer casing. Inside those enormous underground chambers, they quarried the stone, rested, and prepared each load for transport. Sailors such as Merer had to time their journeys with the rising water, bring their boats close to the docks, collect the cargo, and return to Giza. A single delayed shipment could disrupt every stage of work that followed. Even checking the level of the foundation may have depended on remarkably simple tools. Engineers used wooden rods, sighting lines, and the changing shadows of the sun to detect uneven ground. A slightly higher or lower point would cast a different shadow. It sounds primitive, but repeated patiently across the entire site, the method could produce a level of precision impressive even by modern standards. In the end, some of the most revealing answers were not found inside the king's chamber. They were found in the trash. By sifting through 4,500-year-old waste, archaeologists uncovered fish scales, bird bones, and grain husks. These tiny fragments show that the builders ate fish from the Nile, consumed grain, and drank barley beer. History usually celebrates the pharaohs, but ancient garbage has helped us see the ordinary people who actually built their extraordinary monuments. To achieve that level of precision, the Egyptians did not need laser screens or electronic measuring devices. They used wooden rods of equal length, stretched cords between them, and watched how the sunlight cast shadows across the ground. Even a tiny difference in height would change the shadow. It sounds simple, until you remember that they had to repeat the process across an area the size of several football fields, with almost no room for error. But sometimes the clearest clues are not hidden in stone. They are buried in garbage. By sifting through 4,500-year-old waste pits, archaeologists found fish scales, bird bones, and grain husks. These scraps reveal that workers ate fish from the Nile, consumed barley, and drank beer. Things once thrown away as worthless now allow us to glimpse the meals, routines, and everyday lives of people history nearly forgot. The pyramid, however, was not built simply to hold a body. It was more like a machine aimed at immortality. The Egyptians believed that as long as the monument remained standing, the pharaoh's name would continue to exist. The workers may also have believed that helping the king reach the heavens would protect Egypt's future and the future of their own families. Each stone was more than construction material. It was a promise sent into eternity, and this is where nature enters the story. During the flood season, lakes and channels connected to the Nile may have formed around Giza. Rising water allowed cargo boats to travel much closer to the construction site. The Egyptians used dams and gates to control the flow. A force that could destroy crops was transformed into a transportation system. Human beings have always been strange that way. When we cannot defeat nature, we recruit it. Finishing the pyramid was not enough. The builders also had to protect the tomb from thieves. They designed confusing passageways and lowered enormous granite blocks to seal the entrances. It sounds like a nearly perfect security system until archaeologists entered the Great Pyramid and found Khufu's stone sarcophagus empty. Was his body stolen? Was it moved somewhere else? Or is it still hidden inside a chamber no one has discovered? The question of how the stones were moved is not completely settled either. In one modern experiment, researchers attached curved wooden pieces around all four sides of a stone block, giving it a roughly circular shape that could be rolled. The method might make a 2.5-ton block far easier to move, but it remains only a theory. It does not prove the Egyptians used it. It simply shows that an enormous problem can sometimes be solved by one very small idea. Every wonder, however, comes with a cost. The construction site required huge quantities of firewood to heat and prepare the gypsum mortar used in the pyramid. That demand may have placed serious pressure on Egypt's forests and surrounding ecosystems. The pyramid did more than reshape the skyline. It may also have reshaped the environment. History has a habit of doing that, creating a wonder in one place and leaving the bill somewhere else. Now consider a strange contradiction. The most famous surviving statue of King Khufu stands less than 10 centimeters tall. The man who ordered the construction of one of the largest stone monuments on Earth left behind an image small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. The king has almost disappeared, while his monument still casts its shadow across the desert. Perhaps we cannot control exactly how history remembers us. We can only choose what we leave behind. That is why the Great Pyramid was never the achievement of one person alone. It required quarry workers, sailors, cooks, bakers, weavers, doctors, engineers, and administrators. Tens of thousands of people from different parts of Egypt contributed one small piece to a shared goal. They had no computers and no internet, but they had organization, endurance, and the ability to cooperate on an extraordinary scale. Every stone carries the mark of a collective effort. In the end, the greatest secret of the pyramid may not be hidden inside a sealed tunnel or a forgotten machine. It may lie in the human ability to turn belief into a plan into labor, and labor into something that outlives the people who created it. Today, asking a few friends to carry a refrigerator up 3 flights of stairs may still feel like a major challenge. But remember this, great things are not lifted into place all at once. They are built carefully, patiently, one block at a time.